The No Nonsense Roundtable. It's a weekly show broadcast on Rochester, New York's 50,000-watt iHeart radio station, News Radio Wham 1180. The host, Dom Genova, interviews guests from all walks of life, all with amazing stories to tell. What you are about to hear is a recording of a previous broadcast without the breaks and commercials. Now, here's host Dom Genova.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're here today with Bolgen Vargas, who used to be the Rochester City School District Superintendent. Just wrote a book, very fascinating fellow with a fascinating path in life. Welcome to the No Nonsense Radio studio.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Well, and you just came from a book signing. I mean, you had a book signing yesterday, and you had how many people at the book signing?
Barnes & Noble, and we sold over 53 books.
You ran out of books, right?
Yes, the store ran out of book, yeah.
Well, usually I don't do retail this soon, but give us the title of the book.
Yeah, basically it's Let Our Children Soar.
Okay.
And the complexity and possibility of educating student like me who English is not their first language.
Well, it's an incredible story of your life, and not bringing attention to your life, but bringing attention to the path, the different turns you had to take and whatever. So let's start from that. Let's start from the story of your life, because you were born in the Dominican Republic, and it wasn't all that easy, and there wasn't a lot of money in your family. So how did you explain to everybody how life was when you were a boy and how you got here?
Well, to give people a sense, and there are some people, particularly in Western New York, that understand a little bit about growing up in a farm. However, the farm that I grew up is one in which the work that I did was barefoot, for example. So there's a big difference. We didn't have running water or electricity or the technology that you have here in the United States. We didn't have even in elementary school, so I needed to walk to school barefoot. And on a lucky day, I would catch a ride in the back or a donkey. That was the sort of thing. And then I learned to work at an early age, because in a farm, everybody has to contribute. And by the way, the allowance is the food that you produce so that you can survive and grow.
Well, you talk in your book about being a very young boy and climbing the mango trees to get the fruit for your family, and realizing which one would be sweeter than the other, right?
Oh, absolutely. I had a lot of skills that I learned at an early age, from breaking a horse to climbing a mango trees or going fishing, or things that you do that when you need a glass of milk, you don't just think about the supermarket.
Right.
You gotta work for it. And we didn't have a lot in terms of material stuff, but we had enough to feed ourselves, food and that sort of thing. Although there were times, like when we had a bad season, because we didn't have irrigation, if there was a drought, or also hurricanes was prevalent, and there would be a difficult period of time, but we were very hopeful. We also always thought that there would be a better day ahead.
Well, and even water. You didn't have running water, right?
Correct. We had to go to the river to get the water, and that was part of everybody's job. And it was to provide water for our animals, for ourselves, and to do all the utility of lives.
And even something as a pencil.
Oh, absolutely. There was no such a thing. I used to play baseball, and I did a paper for the University of Pennsylvania, and the the professor who asked the class to talk about our first experience in writing. And my first experience was keeping the score for a baseball game. And then you use a stick and everything you made, and then you clean the dirt, and then you write the name of the person in there.
With a stick?
With a stick. And then,
You didn't have a pen.
and everybody, when I was talking about in the class, they really look at me like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because most of my peers and colleagues who were at UPenn with me, I mean, they couldn't believe it that you could have survived not only that situation, but then be next to them.
Right. Well, University of Pennsylvania, that's an Ivy League school, right?
It is. But
What a journey.
believe it or no, I tell people that, at an early age, I learned that work pay off. And when I was there, I questioned whether I was belong there. And I'm sure others questioned that too. But I had a lot of people who supported me and believed in me and say, you're going to do well. And I say this not to be braggadocious or to make myself look good, but I was even more surprised when I was the only one who earned a distinction in my dissertation, which deal with resilience.
Yeah.
In other words, how do you overcome multiple adversities?
Well, what I see is that you didn't have material things. As a matter of fact, I mean, most people would be astonished to even conceive of the environment, the physical environment that you grew up in. Dirt floor in the house, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But your mother was your driver. I mean, your mother. It seems like I see a light in your eyes. Your mother was like, you can do it. She believed in you, and she was the driver of your soul, I guess. That's what I got from the book. She's the one that said, no, I haven't achieved this, but you can achieve this. You can end up better. You can make something of yourself. And that support system has to be the genesis of your whole life, the whole success of your life, I would imagine.
You are 100% correct, and that was powerful. And what is interesting to me is that she didn't have a single day of education, nor her fault, because she was born in the 1920, and she at that time we didn't have even the infrastructure. Interesting enough, in the book I have a chapter in which I talk about how public education began to take place as we know it today in the Dominican Republic, and it was introduced by the U.S. government during 1916. So the chapter in the book, I say, America came to us before we came to America. And I to this day, I believe that was one of the greater contribution at that time was that they, when they revised the Constitution after they left in 1924, one of the law was to provide universal education for children. But the problem was that there was not as many schools as there were children to accommodate the children. And so it took a long time, even in my case, where I grew up, I didn't have a middle school, and my middle school was like what we call a hybrid. I would go to school for 2 hours a day, and then in the evening, I would have radio instruction by a school that was founded by Jesuit. And it's still around today. So, you had to overcome a lot of adversity or barriers, but nevertheless, it's possible. My mother believed, as you said, that we could do better only by getting more education than getting as much education as possible.
And we're going to talk more about your mom right after this break. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're here today with Bolgen Vargas, who was a former RCSD superintendent, has a wonderful book out, Let Our Children Soar. It talks about his journey in life, but also the process of education and bilingual education in the United States. And you're having signings all over the place. And the next one is not local. The next one is like in Albany or something like that, right?
Albany, New York, then I'm going to Maryland.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, the prospect of writing a book is one thing, but then you have to go out and get people you got to get people to buy the book. So those people who won't take a trip to Albany this week, now, how they get your book on Amazon? Or?
They could get it pretty much everywhere. They could get it in the local bookstore like Hippocampo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, actually even Target. Was offering. So it's pretty much all over where books I've been sold.
Well, if you want a book about somebody's life's journey, is a wonderful book, and you touch on so many different things. And one of the things we were talking about was your mother's encouragement of you. And in particular, what impressed me was her encouragement of you to break the journey or lifestyle that would have been more comfortable for you, to do something other than that, to expand your horizon, go get your education, leave the farm.
Correct, yeah. And there was some conflict because my father's view was that you were born in the farm and you died there. Mm-hmm. My mother was the opposite, and actually I'm glad that she succeeded and won the argument, because at the end of the day, we all left. And as a result, I think that as a family, we were better off. And I contribute much of my success to her. And as I said, it's an interesting paradox, because she didn't have a single day of education, but she understood the value of education. And it was very simple rules. You got to do better than what we are doing now.
Well, what the concept is, and I see this in people, creative people, and people that are not boxed into a set way, is that they can see something that other people can't see.
Correct.
So she saw something that your father didn't see or refused to see.
Correct.
But she prevailed.
Yeah. Actually, my father, I mean, for good reason.
Yeah.
He would have preferred for us to put as much time working in the farm than going to school. And I don't know if you remember, when I was a superintendent here, I insisted that every child need to be in the classroom each and every day. Because if you come from a situation like I did, the only hope for a child with my upbringing is the classroom. And also I was very, very fortunate to have teachers that encouraged me to have a library card. And I became obsessed. We go into the library, and so I always surprise me when people say that our children don't have book, which is true. They might not have book at home that they own themselves, but we have one of the institution that I credit, and I want to thank every taxpayer for supporting public libraries, because it's an equalizer. I have as many books as you have.
Oh, that's true.
Actually, there's no a single book. By the way, Rochester is fortunate. Both the city and the county invest significant amount of resources. If one thing that makes me happy to pay my tax bill is the public library, because what it does for our society and for our people, and what it did for me. To this day, I carry my library card from the city of New York, And, in the summer, although I was working to help my family pay rent, it was a full-time job, and it wasn't necessarily to buy, things for myself. I also had a family in the Dominican Republic that my mother expected that we will send them some finance so that they could support themselves. But at the end of the day, people say, well, Bolgen, you made it. And how come so many people cannot do the same? And I say, well, there are several things that I suggest anyone to do. That number one, there's always someone who is willing to help you. My teachers, I was very fortunate with my teachers, and I was very fortunate with even my friends in high school, which in the book I give them credit, because they encouraged me. I didn't have a clue about college, but my counselor, my teacher, they introduced me to this concept. There's a future for you that is better than if you stay working at a restaurant, which I was working at, and that you can pursue any dream you want. And then I had my mother. So I had multiple friends, mother, and teachers, and administrator. And that was powerful. Actually, I did my dissertation in the concept that in order for a child in my situation to overcome multiple adversity, financial, you name it, language barrier, cultural adaptation, and so on and so forth, you need multiple support in multiple places, and that's a key.
That is ringing so true with me. I think from what you just said, I heard two things. One is, I guess to paraphrase it, you may not have the internet, but you can get a library card. I mean, you may not have access to Wi-Fi, but you can get a book. And the other thing is, and I think this is a topic I would like to get on board a little bit more after the news break, but the other concept in that the child can't make it just on his own. He needs a support system, and the support system doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. It can be any number of different people, and there are people that are willing to help mentor children in one way or another. And how do you find those people, and how do those people? But the other thing I want to talk to, quite frankly, before too long, is the rest of your path, because you didn't go from the Dominican Republic to the Rochester City School District. I mean, there was a step or two in there.
There are several.
Yeah. So, fortunately or unfortunately, we're heading into a news break. But after a news break, we're going to continue on with your journey, and then get to some other salient ideas about the schools in New York State and whatever. So, right after this. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're here with Bolgen Vargas, who is a former superintendent of the Rochester City School District, native of the Dominican Republic, and we're talking about his journey in life from growing up in a home where they actually had to go to the stream to get water, to being a supervisor of our school district years ago. And when we left you off, Bowen, at the news break, we were still in the Dominican Republic. So let's give everybody a listen. The next 5 minutes, let's get everybody like here. Okay, so there were no schools until very recently in the Dominican Republic, and let's get to here.
Well, I came to New York City to join my mother and my brother, who came here in 1968, and he came right after the U.S. invasion to the Dominican Republic in 1965. So I ended up in New York directly from the farm with no electricity. I ended up in the Lower East Side, Manhattan.
Okay.
And I was 15 years old or 17. And if you read the book, you will understand why I'm saying that. So I went to Soar Park High School. I didn't know a single word English. And before I entered Soar Park, I already was working in a very luxurious restaurant in New York City. I started washing dishes. Then short after, I got promoted to boss boy. Mm-hmm. And but nevertheless, in Soar Park, I found an incredible support system, or teachers and friends. And I, by accident, which is the best accident that happened to me, was that I was misplaced in an English class. And it was more advanced, basically designed for English-speaking student or native born here. And I ended up for a whole week, I didn't open my mouth. I know that what's going on, although I liked the discussion and everything else. And the teacher asked me a question, and of course, I announced that I wasn't belong there because of my English wasn't at that level. But then they couldn't move me from the class because the master schedule conflict. But anyhow, the teacher, which I highlighted in the book, Mrs. Gorber, said, if you work hard, and you pass and you do the work, I would pass you. But if you fail, you fail. So in that class, I read more books that I had read in my prior 3 years of high school. And also I met the school librarian, who said the secret, it's read. And actually, I was one of the first in 1981 when I graduated from high school. They began to, the Board of Regents in New York State introduced a test for the Regent competency test. And I was able to pass the writing and the reading, which was a graduation requirement. And I said to the teacher, I don't think that test is valid. I passed. And then she said, you ought to consider, you don't like New York City because you live here in Delancey Street and Lulu, which was a very tough neighborhood next to Bowery Street. And my mother, for example, on the weekend, she would be feeding homeless and a lot of, sadly, many of the homeless population at that time were Vietnam vet and Korean. And I'm so proud of my mother to think about other. Yeah. How here she was struggling, working, babysitting and taking care of children, but nevertheless, she found time to support people that she thought were less fortunate than her.
So I've heard this time and time again with my show that some educators somewhere in their life touched them, or a police officer, or somebody mentored them. And is that just a matter of happenstance, or did she see something in you? You think she saw something in you like you were really trying, or your engagement with her? How did she pick you? How did she say, rather than, oh, this is just some kid and it's unfortunate he's in the class, but he really shouldn't be here. We're going to say, hey, listen, you know what? I'm going to spend some time. I'm going to invest my life in you because I see something. Is that?
Well, it happened often, more than what we give the public school system credit. In the case of my teacher, she saw my potential. And any good teacher, the first thing that they see in any child is their potential. And they have what is called a growth mindset. So they look for possibilities. And that's the subtitle of my book. How is it possible? You had to have high expectation. but also help if you have high expectation at home, which I was very, very fortunate that at least my mother, had it been for my father would say, well, you're making enough money at the restaurant. It is time, why do you want to lose that? My mother believed more or less in taking risk and that there was something better than what I had if I got an education. And so that was important, but also it was important that my teachers and the school administrator saw that within me. Also, I got help from an organization called Aspira, who was looking for kids that were interested in going to college. And they, gave me tutoring for the SAT. And then I found SUNY Brockport, who opened the door for me. So the gate was open, and it's what you call it. I was so fortunate and blessed that I was able to take advantage of pretty much every opportunity that was offered to me, because my story would not have been possible in any other country that I know. And I even told my friends, because I've been in Europe, I know a little bit about opportunity, and you don't want to be any other place in the world as an immigrant, in my experience, as in any other place is not than the United States.
And so you, geographically, you went from the Lower East Side to Brockport.
Correct, and that was a lot of farm in between. So I was pleased when I left New York City to Brockport. It was green space, and
made you feel comfortable, right?
Oh God, I felt like, and then people were telling me, "Why are you going there? It's so cold."
Well, okay, yeah.
And I said, "Well, my teacher told me." Because you got to believe. If people believe in you, then you also have to believe in yourself. Because, it's like telling someone, be happy. You need to be happy. If that was that simple.
Yeah.
It's very complicated. Most people think it's very simple. For example, when people want to give me 100% of the credit for the little success that I have achieved, I say, well, there's so many people and system behind, including the SUNY system.
Well, we are heading into another break, and we're going to come back and talk about, a little bit more about your experience at Brockport, but also the philosophy of your book. And we'll be talking about that right after this. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're talking to Bolgen Vargas, who just wrote a book, Let Our Children Soar. He was a former superintendent of the Rochester City School District and went to college at Brockport. And from there, let's know the rest of your story.
Yeah, from there, I graduated in 4 years, so on time.
Okay.
And I was fortunate to be able to finish. And it wasn't easy. But again, I found a lot of support in Brockport. I remember one professor who I did a paper for, and he said, well, this paper is good, but there are some challenging with this. It has some grammatical issue that you need to take care. I don't want to give you less than a C, but here, rewrite it. And he put me in his little office and and watched me rewrite the paper, basically correct the mistake, and gave me an opportunity. So he said, I'm going to give you a C, although the paper is worth more than that. And I said that because that's a form of support. It's another second chance that I was given for a class. Yeah,
you're fortunate you had enough of them. So how did you get to the position of RCSD superintendent? Tell me
Yeah, and I worked as school counselor at Greece Arcadia High School for 20 years. And before that, I worked for through the Research Foundation in a program that were to prepare and help people that were in public assistance to get into the workforce. And then I decided to be a school counselor, and I went to Greece at the finish, and 20 years working as a counselor. Then I went to the Rochester City School District as a superintendent. Prior to that, I had served as a president of the school board in the 90s. And so I became involved in the community, and I did a lot of work with a lot of community service, a lot of volunteer services. Actually, I know that one of you prior guests got an award from the Salvation Army. So when I heard that, I said, well, I got one too. And I did volunteer work for people who were less fortunate than I was.
Well, your book talks a lot about bilingual education and what children need. And that's got to be with the immigration issue that we have now. That has to be all the more important now in this day and age than it was years ago. Is that true?
Oh, yes, it's extremely important. As you know, the immigration, first of all, America have been what is called pull you in. So we pull people from all over the world that are facing challenging situation. And I mean, today is the Ukraine. Tomorrow could be another country. Our children from Venezuela and many parts of Latin America. It's a society that, because there are opportunity here, people see a place where they want to be so that they could thrive. So immigration and education are interconnected. So for mostly their children, the immigrant children, are very fortunate to, if they can find school where they get the support that I got. So, but it's a challenge for the public school system there are over 5 million children that English is not their first language or is not spoken at home. 5 million. And the public school system does a good job. Actually, the public education system, I don't think that this nation would be as successful as it is with our public education system. And now, it has a lot of challenge. Sadly, Rochester is one of those places that seem to be stuck in making the necessary change that I needed.
I think that the general public is kind of woefully unaware of what happens when. So, for whatever reason, when an immigrant family comes here, and let's say Spanish is their, I guess is their only language. Now, how does it work? I mean, the student enrolls in school, comes to school, and what? I mean, what?
Well, they are, by law, this public education system had to have a teacher that I train or educated to deal with a child like I used to be. And if you're fortunate, you have them, but this nation has a challenge that go back to the 1960s, that we don't have enough teacher that I prepare to work with children that English is not their first language. There's a shortage today. Many people think that it's because of the pandemic, but it go way back to the 1960s. And it's a challenge that this nation is facing, because if we don't educate every child, then the consequences for not just for the child and their family, but also for society is very great.
Well, this compels the question that now it's not all Spanish speakers. I mean, some of them are Azerbaijan, whatever. I mean, what do you do with those children?
All of them, and that's a challenge, and that people don't realize when they talk about school failure. Sometimes they don't take into consideration the challenge that is coming into the school door. By the way, it's the only institution that is required to receive those kids. And they what you do the best you can, which our teachers and our administrator are doing that. However, we cannot leave this population to chance. There's an urgent need to prepare and support our teacher to work with our population. We have refugees here from all over the world. And as a superintendent, I dealt daily. I was superintendent in Manchester, New Hampshire, and 23% of our population was immigrant and refugee children. The same thing here in Rochester is around 20%. And in the nation, it's 10% of the population of the public school children are children that are refugee or immigrant or come from home where English is not spoken, such as the Native Americans population.
Well, we are running out of time, unfortunately. So tell me the one thing from your book that you hope people take back with them.
My hope is that people will take is that if the possibility that if you support a child, regardless of their social condition, and that support comes from multiple places, that you're going to raise a child that is healthy, will achieve, and expect from them as much as you can.
And the other thing I think I got from your interview today, too, is that one person can have an incredible effect on a child in a child's direction, right?
Absolutely, one person. But if a child have multiple adversity, let's say language condition, economic situation, like the neighborhood that I grew up, the gang members were out to me to recruit me. It wasn't IBM that was looking for me.
Sure.
So when you're in that situation, you need multiple support in multiple places. And there are. The public library is the safer place, and even in the neighborhood in the 70s in New York City. But you had to have people that guide you. A kid like me that came from the farm didn't know that I could get books for free, basically, and spend time in a place with air conditioning, that I didn't have a home in a hot day in the middle of the summer in New York City.
Well, Bowen, it has been delightful having you here. I learned an awful lot, and I encourage everybody to get his book, Let Our Children Soar. You can get a number of different places, and I have to tell you, if you like the interview today, you will get so much more out of this book. Go get the book, share the book. But thank you ever so much for being here, and maybe I can have you again soon.
Thank you. I will welcome the opportunity.
Thanks for listening. Tune in every weekend from 10 to 11 on News Radio WHAM 1180. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll make more.